Welcome to Valley Newsline for the week of February 18, 2007. Hello, I'm your host, Ron Whitlock. United States Senators from Texas John Cornyn and Kay Bailey Hutchison have set up a meeting between Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff and Texas border mayors and leaders in Laredo this Wednesday. The Texas Border Coalition, at a February meeting in the La Posada Hotel in Laredo this Tuesday, will be getting together one day before Chertoff comes to Laredo. Texas Border Coalition Chairman and El Eagle Pass Mayor Chad Foster told the Rio Grande Guardian that Secretary Chertoff assured us he would come down to the Texas border when we met with him in Washington last month. Foster also told the Guardian that the mayors will reiterate their message for a border fence not to be built when Chertoff visits with them in Laredo this week. Foster says we want the Secretary to feel the border. We want to reiterate the reasons why we feel it's not necessary to have a border fence or a border wall. Like everyone says, it is an 18th century solution to a 21st century problem. Unlike Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, according to Foster, Texas already has a tremendous natural boundary, the Rio Grande River. Unlike Arizona and New Mexico, most of the border region in Texas is in private land. Landowners are opposed to the fence as well as the communities. Under House Resolution 6061, otherwise known as the Security Fence Act, the Department of Homeland Security is required now to install 700 miles of fence, including 176 miles of fencing between Laredo and Brownsville and 51 miles of fencing between Del Rio and Eagle Pass. But there are more issues than just the proposed fence. That's the point we would make to you. If your mayor is going to be visiting with Michael Chertoff, who will be meeting and what will he tell the Secretary when he comes to the border? Secretary Chertoff can affect the lives of everyone who lives along the border region by actions that he takes or does not take. If Chertoff clamps down too hard on the border by requiring passports 10 months from now for any U.S. citizen wanting to leave a border crossing point and other aspects of U.S. visit under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security, Chertoff will be stifling the Texas border and U.S. economy. If Chertoff doesn't plan for the South Texas region's hurricane preparedness needs, if a storm were to hit when hurricane season arrives in a short 4 months from now, it could have a devastating effect on many people, the millions who live along the border region in the United States and Mexico. Valley Newsline encourages you to make contact with your mayor and tell him what you think Chertoff needs to hear when he comes to the border region this week. We'll let you know about Senator John Cornyn and a plan to try to get Secretary Chertoff to come back to South Texas, because Senator Cornyn told us prior to the announcement of this Laredo meeting that Secretary Chertoff would be coming to the Rio Grande Valley. Here's that interview with Senator Cornyn. Senator, on recent editions of our program, we've had the partnership president, Bill Summers, a friend of yours, along with Mayor Mike Allen, Richard Cortez, both of whom are joining with Valley Newsline in inviting the Secretary of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff, to come to the region to inspect it, to look at the other areas other than what he last visited about, and that was an issue related to more border patrolmen. Would you join with these three entities in inviting Secretary Chertoff and maybe accompany him in coming down to the region?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the meeting that we all three attended, along with other border leaders, just a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C., the Secretary said that he would come to the Valley and sometime the next, I think he said 30 to 45 days, and it'll be more than for just a photo opportunity. Hopefully we'll be able to show him some things that will help inform him and his agency better to try to strike the balance that we're all talking about between trade and commerce, that it benefits this entire region, both sides of the border, and the security that we know is an important part of that balance.
Now, hopefully, this still means that Secretary Chertoff also plans to come to the Rio Grande Valley following his trip to Laredo this coming week. And as you saw, Senator Cornyn said he would be coming to South Texas for more than a photo op. Now, a photo op is what Secretary Chertoff did hold here in the Rio Grande Valley, along the border, on the banks of the Rio Grande, just south of La Feria, when we asked him this question. Secretary Chertoff, Ron Whitlock, Valley Newsline. If you would think about it, you must realize, obviously, from where you stand, that the air you breathe was in Mexico a few brief minutes ago. And the water that you see behind you is the water supply for the 1 million people who occupy this region called the Rio Grande Valley. Not only that, this region provides sole source products to Detroit and keeps Detroit open under just-in-time delivery or closed if those products are not able to be manufactured. The federal government required the water utilities in the area to do a vulnerability assessment several years ago. They are now striving to find funds to try and provide some kind of monitoring for the water, because as you can easily see, to attack America, you don't even have to come to America. You don't have to get beyond these men in uniform, swim the river, climb a wall, or anything else. Just put something in that water behind you and you will attack America. Could you see fit to add water utility vulnerability assessment monitoring equipment to your security border initiative?
Well, I think what I'm going to say is this. We have, of course, through the state Homeland Security grant funding process, a whole range of funding for states to make sure they elevate their protection of critical infrastructure. That includes water utilities, includes power plants, and other kinds of critical infrastructure that's important to deal with the issue of a threat to the public safety and welfare. I think this particular initiative, though, is really focused on dealing with the issue of people getting across the border. So I'm confident that, the governor, who's obviously getting this money, is mindful of the challenges here as throughout the rest of the state, and that he's going to pay very careful attention to what can be done to make sure that all the facilities here are as secure as they can possibly be.
Earlier, Senator Cornyn told us and agreed with us in an interview at Harlingen that the senator doesn't think that the federal government understands the unique vulnerabilities that exist along the U.S.-Mexico border here in the Rio Grande Valley. Does Homeland Security understand the unique characteristics of the threat that exists here on the border?
I doubt it, but that's my job to try to make sure that we deal with it as much as we can.
There's late breaking news on Homeland Security issues for the border in South Texas based on Al-Qaeda's review of President Bush's State of the Union address and his statement calling for the United States' need to urgently reduce its dependency on oil from the Middle East. A bin Laden group is now calling for strikes against oil targets in Mexico, which is a major supplier of petrochemical products to the United States. Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia, in an article called Bin Laden and the Oil Weapon, has recently reinforced its call to hit refineries and other petrochemical infrastructure in not only Mexico at our southern border, but also Canada and Argentina. This should call all of us living along the U.S.-Mexico border to take notice. Why? Well, because undoubtedly, if the bin Laden-led terrorist group did a minimal amount of homework in selecting a prospective petrochemical plant attack in Mexico, it would learn that one of the Mexican facilities located only a few miles from the United States does exist just west of Reynosa, across from McAllen, Texas. And if this particular Reynosa, Mexico plant were to be successfully attacked, the resulting potentially toxic fumes would be downwind of 1 million American citizens who live in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. And any resulting spills could reach the Rio Grande River, which is the region's sole water supply. Not only that, if the Reynosa, Mexico Pemex plant were to be the focus of a successful Al-Qaeda attack in Mexico, as the terrorist group is now calling for, its location near the Reynosa, McAllen, Maquiladora twin plant trade zones could shut down automotive plants in Detroit, because these Detroit plants depend on over 60 sole source automotive parts that are made only in Reynosa, Mexico. Our question is, has our Department of Homeland Security given consideration to this situation with the Pemex plant in Reynosa, involving the location of that plant just across the border? Hopefully, Homeland Security under Michael Chertoff has given it some amount of thought. United States Senator John Cornyn of Texas drew praise when Valley Newsline interviewed him, along with the mayor of Hidalgo, John David Franz. Cornyn was there in the Rio Grande Valley at the Mexican border to announce his bill to make it mandatory that Homeland Security issue 6-month visitation parity for Mexican shoppers in the United States. Well, Senator, as you know, the first time we became acquainted with each other, I was the one of the coordinators of your debate in Brownsville.
Right.
Asked you a question as one of the members of the debate panel about I-69.
I forgot what that question was. You're going to remind me.
No, it was about I-69, what you were going to do. And what this senator did, mayor and chairman of BTA, was the first time he came back to Texas after going to Washington, D.C., he brought the chairman of the committee from the Senate to the state of Texas for a hearing on I-69.
Mm-hmm.
What more could you expect on an elected official than that?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Chairman Inhofe, I remember, who spends a little bit of his time in South Padre Island.
Well, you don't want to talk about that. That made it easier for you to get him here.
It made it easier to get him here, but
you still brung him.
But I appreciate
As
you
we
bringing
say
that
in
up.
Texas, you still brung him. So fast forward to 2004, we're at a press conference with Governor Perry, and I asked him a question about would he feel appropriate to grant our Mexican citizens 6-month parity with Canadians to bring more dollars to Texas. And I turned to Ana Garcia and I said, I'd like your senator to give us a response. Your response was to go over to across the street to DHS and convince them to go 30 days. How about that?
It was a start.
How about that? And he's been beating up on them ever since.
Well, now this new legislation that I'll introduce on Monday in Washington will establish that 6-month parity. So some people have asked me, why do we treat Canadians differently than the way we treat Mexicans, particularly when they go through the background process to get a laser visa.
A more extensive process.
Yeah, these are not people who are going to violate their visa terms and actually move here, but they want to come and be able to visit and frankly to help stimulate our economy. So I hope that we'll get quick passage of that legislation.
Now, you've already visited with Secretary Chertoff, and what was his response here recently?
Well, he seemed to be receptive. I think he's got a lot on his plate. Mayor Franz and Pete were up there recently with all the border mayors and other border leaders talking about.
But he didn't seem like he's going to do it administratively like Secretary Ridge had indicated he might.
He didn't say no, but I think what this legislation will do, it will require him to do it. In other words, we're not just asking, this would mandate it.
Your reaction, gentlemen, to what the senator is telling us about the bill he's going to file?
Well, I think it's great. I think the senator has been our champion in leading the efforts on getting parity with the Canadian border. I remember a couple of years ago talking to Senator staff with the BTA, and we had a plan that was going to accomplish what we wanted, which was a parity with the Canadian border, and the plan was going to be done in different phases. And I think the announcement by Senator Cornyn today, along with the passage of that legislation, is going to accomplish what we've been working with the senator for the last couple of years, and that's parity with the Canadian border. Getting the extension from the 72 hours to the 30 days that we now have, thanks to the senator, but going from the 30 days to the 6 months. And I think that's great. I echo the comments the senator just made regarding what that does to our economy here locally.
Mayor Franz, this kind of a filing of a bill also could be a positive sign as it relates to our Mexican neighbors when we've been talking about a fence for so long. This is a positive sign. Would you not agree?
Absolutely, and I think what we've experienced here at the Citrus Fiesta, Senator Cornyn, he already knew this, but he experienced firsthand the relationship that Mayor Salinas' mission, the Rio Grande Valley shares with very good well-meaning, well-intentioned people in Mexico, and I think that's the challenge in Washington, is to get the discussion on the good people, the law-abiding people, the people that can help us and we can help them, rather than focusing on, you know, the one or two bad apples. And as a mayor of a community on the river, I'm all for remaining free, and I've asked the senator to keep us free. We don't want to be locked down. This is America, and I may be on the front line, I may be at risk on the Rio Grande, but freedom is much more valuable to me than having a wall there.
We thought it might be interesting to give you a sampling of a couple of our interviews over the last 3-year period with Senator John Cornyn of Texas. The issue of those discussions: the discriminatory nature of the U.S. government's granting of 6-month visitation privileges to Canadians while limiting our Mexican neighbors to only 3 days, which was extended to 30 days where it is now, and potentially 6 months if Senator John Cornyn's bill, which he's recently filed, is passed by the United States Congress and then signed by President Bush. On October 23rd, we interviewed Texas Governor Rick Perry and asked him if he would support an initiative for parity for our Mexican shoppers and others to come to our country and stay longer than 72 hours and being on par level with our Canadians of 6 months, and he said that he would. We asked for your response to that, and about 2 weeks later, you filed a bill making that something that may happen legislatively. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. When I first learned about the problems associated with implementing the U.S. visit law, which of course requires a means to document the entry and the exit of visitors into the United States, I became concerned when I found that Mexicans who want to visit the United States were limited to 72 hours and could only travel 25 miles inland, whereas Canadians had 6 months and no geographic limitation, and I thought that was unfair.
Kind of discriminatory.
Well, I think so. I mean, the first question I asked was why, and there was a deafening silence. No one came up with any reason at all, much less a good reason.
Senator, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, has given you verbal assurances over the last few months of granting 6-month parity to Mexican shoppers to be on par level with Canadian shoppers. Based on that being a verbal assurance, are you concerned in any way that he might slip out the back door as he's leaving and not get that done administratively?
Well, the assurance that I've received is that ultimately we want to make sure that we treat all of the guests that come visit the United States the same way. There's no good reason why we should discriminate against visitors from one country over another. And it's just, frankly, when I tried to find the reason why Mexicans were limited to 72 hours while Canadians were given up to 6 months, no one could provide me with a good reason. So I think it's one of those accidents of history that need to be corrected. But ultimately, we're going to see whether it's European visitors who come to our country, or whether it's Mexicans who come across the border here in South Texas, or Canadians from the north, that we're going to treat all of them the same. But we're going through a painful transition right now to make that happen. But I'm not concerned about achieving that goal, and I pledge to my friends here in the Valley that we will make that happen.
Former Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge indicated to you before you left office he was going to grant administratively 6-month parity to Mexican citizens, which Canadians currently enjoy. Have you talked to the new Secretary Chertoff about doing this? And if so, what has been his response?
Well, I agree that the goal is that we treat all of our visitors exactly the same. The problem has been that has sunk in terms of the priorities in deference to other issues like dealing with border security and the rest. But certainly that is my goal. We should not treat Canadians in one way and treat Mexicans or Central or South Americans in another way. So I will not let that rest. I know you won't let me let that rest, because every time I come here you ask me about it, and you're right to do so.
You were very, very positive about the former secretary granting that. So based on your positiveness, that's why the question continues to come back. Are you as optimistic that the current secretary will do it, maybe?
Well, I don't know when it will be done. I think it's a question of when, not if. I have every confidence that it will ultimately be done.
United States Texas Senator John Cornyn has the support and praise of many border leaders in his efforts to gain the 6-month parity for Mexican shoppers coming to Texas and the United States. Texas Governor Rick Perry recently came to the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas to announce that he had another solution to border security along the U.S.-Mexico border, and that, of course, was more National Guardsmen, more boots on the ground.
We've launched a statewide operation this week. Its code name is Operation Wrangler. Operation Wrangler is a statewide surge operation involving law enforcement at all levels and the Texas National Guard. We're bringing tremendous force to bear with an enforcement presence of over 6,800 individuals. In order to continuously fund surge operations like this one in the future, I'm going to be asking the legislature to appropriate $100 million in border security this legislative session. The best border security policy involves boots on the ground, those patrol cars, the aviation assets in the air, more patrol boats, the latest law enforcement technology that's available. All of this costs money.
Following the governor's announcement, we asked him this question.
Governor, I've talked to both yourself and your Director of Homeland Security and also Secretary Chertoff about the unique vulnerability of the 1 million Texans, U.S. citizens who live here in the Valley, because their sole water supply, the Rio Grande River, is uniquely vulnerable because that river is shared with Mexico and could be attacked very easily without anybody coming across the border, and troops on the ground and boots on the ground will have nothing to do about that. That requires technology to know if we've been attacked with an airborne or waterborne attack. Now, with the southeast winds coming off of Mexico 90% of the time, that's the same. Nobody has to come to Texas to attack the 1 million people here in the Rio Grande Valley. What do you propose to use to fund technology to try and deal with this unique vulnerability?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the briefing. You did a great job in recognizing a potential threat. And in fact, what I'd like to do is have a follow-up briefing with you, because I've met with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and other individuals to address the specific issues. I mean, some of those things dealt with sewage, locations and things like that, because one of the things the governor's part of his Homeland Strategic Plan is those very areas, as you know, in terms of protection. So I look forward to getting back with you on that, because I got some of the answers that you're looking for, and we'll discuss it in more detail, okay?
As an update, within 2 weeks of his announcement here in South Texas, in the city of McAllen, of Operation Wrangler, Governor Perry canceled that program. Stay tuned to Valley Newsline for more updates on border security and things that are happening here along the U.S.-Mexico border at valleynewsline.tv and here at valleynewsline.com. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, adios.